Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. For the first time in Season 7 of this show. Lucky number 7, Matt.
Is it lucky? I think so. Yeah, I'm excited.
Seven is most definitely a lucky number. We have reached that quite lofty goal, and yeah, it's time to kick off a new season of the show. Talk about a new game. Of course, it's one that we've been, I think, very excited to get into. Really, ever since we started this podcast, I think this was always going to be one of our big question mark games, mostly just because it is a game that one half of this podcasting trio had never played.
Trio?
So,
you can't have
duo.
half of a trio.
Sorry, one half of this pod. Well, in fairness, we generally have three people, but yeah, one half of this podcasting duo. That math checks out. Who had not played it. So anyway, I think for that reason alone, this conversation is going to be excellent. Of course, we're going to get into that here in just a minute, but before we do that, Matt, I want to ask you, how you doing tonight?
I am good. It has been an interesting couple of weeks, winding down the season. Last season, as I don't know if it's been said on any podcast since it happened, but I was actually in a pretty bad car wreck a couple of weeks ago.
It did make it
into last week's episode.
With
the
Hyrule podcasters.
Yeah, just to give everybody a little more context, I was in a car wreck a couple of weeks ago during one of the really crazy thunderstorms here in Texas. I had to go to a friend's rehearsal for their wedding. I was in the wedding, so I didn't have an opportunity to say a negative. So I was out driving around, and I drive a Mustang, so not exactly the best car for rainy weather, and I hydroplaned and spun a couple of times. I didn't flip, it just spun horizontally, and hit a concrete wall. So I'm okay, thank God, and car's pretty much okay. It's getting fixed, which should apparently take about 2 months because of supply chain reasons and lack of available labor reasons, which hooray, macroeconomic difficulties. But yeah, so it's been an interesting couple of weeks. Just to reiterate, though, I'm okay and very glad to be here. Very glad to be talking about Zelda, and glad that I was not injured and nobody else was injured in the process either. So, yeah, other than that, I think past that, just getting ready for the peak season of e-commerce, which, Cyber Week is crazy for us, and we're recording a little bit earlier than normal just because I'm going to be traveling a lot over the next week and a half or two. So we're trying to knock out a couple episodes before that happens. So we're actually recording this almost a full week in advance.
This one is actually on schedule. The one that we're going to record with Cody, the Barack Obama of Australia himself. The one that we're going to record with him on Monday is going to be about a week in advance of when we would have really needed to do it. Just to get ahead of that. So yeah, I mean, definitely a very busy season for everybody. And, we kind of looked back at the schedule, and I think at the moment we're not going to need to delay any episodes by a week, but as always, as we get into the holiday season, if things just, truly go sideways in any meaningful way, we'll keep y'all in the loop. And if we need to push some stuff out, then we may make that call. But right now, everything looks like it should fall into place pretty well. And Wind Waker should be carrying us into the new year.
Well, that is exciting. So, it's going to be fun. I will say that I have enjoyed this so far, and I'm very much looking forward to more. It is going to be an interesting scheduling challenge not being able to play this on any kind of mobile device. We've been pretty spoiled so far. Excuse you. Sorry. We've been pretty spoiled so far by having games that have been either on the 3DS or the Switch. And this is our first one that we're actually having to sit down in front of a TV for a couple hours at a time and knock through. So that's, I think, going to be an interesting challenge for us that we haven't had to do before.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. I know that you at least have got, well, actually, Oh, you're not flying to Colorado, but I know you have at least one plane flight for work in your immediate future that probably would have been really nice to be able to play this on the Switch for.
Oh yeah, I would have probably knocked out an entire episode's worth of game time on each trip because I'm going to Vegas, which is about a 3 or 4 hour flight from Dallas. So like I would have had plenty of time to knock through a whole section of game in that time. And I will not have that opportunity anymore. So I guess it's back to Nice Old Republic on Switch or something because don't want to do any other Zelda and get my wires crossed. So got to figure something else to play.
It is most definitely a shame, but you know what? We've got 2 perfectly good Wii U's. We're getting some TV time. Neither of us have been that kind of narrative gamer in a little while, so it's a fun little return to the days of yore. Honestly, is what I'm finding it to be.
It feels nostalgic in and of itself, just playing Zelda on a TV screen, which I haven't done in a while.
Yeah, could not agree more. And yeah, I think I definitely think that I'm going to, unless something really, unless I just can't get TV time, I don't think I'm going to be indulging in the gamepad play feature at all. I think I'm just going to do it as God intended in HD on a widescreen TV. So
as God intended once the remake came out, you mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, but it was all part of the plan, Matt. It was all part of the plan.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Cool. Well, obviously, we're going to have a lot to talk about in this first chapter of Wind Waker, taking our first steps into this incredibly classic game, very different game than the last few that we've been playing. It's going to be a great conversation. We can't wait for y'all to join us. Let's go ahead and get some housekeeping out of the way, though, so that we can dive right into that. Matt is holding up the finger of podcast interruption.
Indeed. Before we get into housekeeping, what's the over-under on us being able to keep episodes sub 2 hours in this season?
I think that I think the odds are pretty good. I think this episode at least is going to come in sub 2 hours, if for no other reason than because it's just us two. And
that always shortens conversation a bit.
Yeah, adding a third person is definitely always an X factor on top of things. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like my gut tells me that 2 hours, 2 hours to 2:15 should be our golden number this season. I think it's probably what things are gonna land at. I could be wrong. You know what? We might be a little bit more brief, but at this point, I'm shooting over rather than assuming that we're going to go short all of a sudden out of nowhere. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, none of our 3D games have ever been 2 hours. I mean, we got close in Breath of the Wild more than once, but I don't even think any of our Breath of the Wild episodes got over 2 hours.
One of them had to have. That game was massive. At least the intro episode had to have been about that long.
I think it probably was close, but yeah, I mean, we're not normally as loquacious on games that we sing mostly praises of. So I think that's probably the limiting factor there.
Well, there you have it. We don't expect to be spending 13 or however many weeks. It's 9 weeks just serially dunking on the Wind Waker. So
I felt like we didn't serially dunk on Adventure of Link either, which is why those episodes were so crazy long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see, Matt. You know what? At the end of the episode, we'll see where we clock in. But I am guessing under 2 hours. You're guessing over?
No, I think we'll be under.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's only one way to find out. We got to actually do the pod.
We got to do some pod.
All right, y'all. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get on our show is that we read their names every week here on the podcast. Those legendary individuals are Kelso, Chris, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Allie, Lennon, Kolgu, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Keep It Going, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Tyler, Ben, Daniel, NickD_TV, Christian, Jonathan, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. You are the most legendary of individuals. We would sail the high seas with you any day. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played. We do that every week, of course, in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering Chapter 1 of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker, covering the game intro and our first steps into the Forsaken Fortress. Of course, part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap. Tonight, read for you by Matt. Matt, it's your inaugural. It's the recounting of your inaugural dive into the Wind Waker, and I can't wait to see what you got for us.
It's gonna be one for the history books. Actually, surprisingly, we did have someone reach out to us on Twitter the other day who asked if we had all of our plot recaps written down anywhere, and unfortunately, the answer to that is no, because I just delete them and write over them for the next one. And I'm feeling very bad about that now. So if any enterprising individual wants to take on the project of
like transcribing
either with a program, or if you're a masochist by hand or by keyboard, all of our plot recaps, we would love to archive those somewhere and keep them around, because I do work very hard on these and never thought that anybody would be interested enough in them to have them saved. So
really didn't think ahead on that one.
I know I'm going to start saving them going forward, but if anybody wants to do that for all 80 something episodes of the podcast so far, and granted, we don't have a plot recap in all of them, but the vast majority. So if anyone wants to do that, hit us up. We'll try to figure out a way to compensate you for your time in some way, shape, or form.
with trading cards, or at the very least with very kind words.
Yeah, one or the other, or both. I don't know.
Probably both.
Probably both. Okay, right. Anyway.
All that is to say, plot recap, The Wind Waker Chapter 1. Take it away, Matt.
Long ago, there existed a kingdom where a golden power lay hidden. It was a prosperous land blessed with green forests, tall mountains, and peace. But one day, a man of great evil found the golden power and took it for himself. With its strength at his command, he spread darkness across the kingdom. But then, when all hope had died and the hour of doom seemed at hand, a young boy clothed in green appeared as if from nowhere. Wielding the blade of evil's bane, he sealed the Dark One away and gave the land light. This boy who traveled through time to save the land was known as the Hero of Time, and the boy's tale was passed down through generations until it became legend. But then a day came when a fell wind began to blow across the kingdom, and the great evil that all thought had been forever sealed away by the hero once again crept forth from the depths of the earth, eager to resume its dark reign. The people believed that the Hero of Time would come again to save them, but the hero did not appear. Faced by an onslaught of evil, the people could do nothing but appeal to the gods. In their last hour, as doom drew nigh, they left their future in the hands of fate. What became of that kingdom? None remain who know. The memory of the kingdom vanished, but its legend survived on the wind's breath. And on our home island of Outset Island, it has become customary to garb boys in green when they come of age. Clothed in the green of fields, we are supposed to be inspired to find heroic blades and cast down evil. But what the elders really wish for us to know is courage, like the hero of legend.
I just want to say I'm really proud that we kind of avoided the traditional narrative perspective shift halfway through the first plot recap of the season, right? Like you kind of skirted around that a little bit.
I tried to make it smooth and like flowing, and I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it after 7 seasons.
Much like the ocean.
The ocean isn't always smooth, Lyndon.
Fair enough.
More like a babbling brook.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
It is that day for us now, our birthday. And while we have snuck off to find some peace and quiet to nap in the warm coastal sun, our capricious younger sister has no desire to see us nap this special day away. She finds us in our favorite napping spot and promptly rouses us from our slumber. Errol is her normal bundle of joy. Though we want to sleep the day away, her infectious smile and exuberance make it bearable to face this ancient custom that we have been told about all our lives. We head on down to see Grandma, and she gives us the customary green clothes, which are just unseasonably hot for this climate. But they were made with love and care and fit perfectly. So on they go for this special day. Grandma asks us to go get Errol and bring her back so that the party can start in fervor. As we head off to find Errol, where we left her, we come across many of the inhabitants of our home island, including the enigmatic brothers living in the house next door. The older brother has a large collection of handy notes that detail tips and tricks of life, quote unquote, but the younger brother has a much more pragmatic take on life. Orca is the only person on the island that still studies the way of the sword, and we decide to get a quick lesson. But we need to get Errol, so we head back to the lookout spot, and there we find her, as we knew we would. But surprisingly, she gives us our first birthday present of the day. Her prized telescope is ours, but only for the day, of course. As we're using it to look around, we see the Rito mailman begin to absolutely go cuckoo. Looking up, we see the most monstrous and enormous bird that has ever been thought up in a child's nightmare. In its claws, it carries a young woman, and in its wake, a pirate ship is hot on its tail, launching stone after stone as it is trying to shoot down the bird. In an absolute miracle of luck, the pirates hit the bird, but that spells disaster for the young woman as she is dropped from an insane height into the forest at the top of the mountain of Outset Island. Errol cries. Is it Errol or Arl?
Errol.
Okay, good. I said that right. Like the bird and the owl in Harry Potter.
Yes, but spelled much
differently. Yeah.
That's like Errol Flynn.
Yeah. Errol cries that we have to go help the poor girl, and being the noble and heroic person we are, or maybe it's just these damn green clothes, we head to the Swordmaster Orca to borrow a sword. We need the sword to cut through the tough underbrush blocking the path to the mountain, but also because it is purported to have monsters inside. Orca loans us a blade after a further demonstration of our ability, and we head off to save the young woman. Once we reach the forest, we find it fully overgrown, and we do even find a lone bokoblin that quickly falls to our sword work. The young woman was saved from certain death by a handy tree branch that caught her vest, which is apparently made of mithril in order to survive an impact like that without tearing. She quickly wakes up and panics, sufficiently to break the branch and fall to the ground. And as she does, her crew shows up exclaiming how happy they are to see her alive. Tetra, which is what they call her, immediately calls for her crew to head back to the ship and chase down the bird. As we all leave the mountain without even so much as a thank you from Tetra, we see Errol running towards us. In a moment of pure horror, the giant bird returns and swoops down to pluck Errol right off the ground and fly away. In a moment of panic, we try to rush after her, only to fall to certain death if it weren't for the speedy, strong hands of Tetra that catch us. We head down the mountainside and demand that Tetra and her crew take us with them to find the bird and our sister. And even though Tetra callously tells us to just forget about her and move on. Just as we're about to run Tetra through with our sword for being a callous tart, the Rito mailman interjects and absolutely destroys Tetra in front of her crew. Not only reminding Tetra that we saved her life, but that it's her fault in the first place that Errol got taken, because the bird obviously mistook Errol for Tetra. Also, he reveals that young girls with long ears, the like of which Errol and Tetra both have been getting kidnapped all over the Great Sea lately and taken to the bird's roost, which is at the Forsaken Fortress. Begrudgingly, Tetra agrees to take us there, but only if we can at least find a shield with which to defend ourselves. We head back home where the ancestral shield has been hanging on the wall for as long as we can remember, but we find it gone from the top loft, and as we look around, Grandma confronts us about Errol's disappearance. She is of course heartbroken for our sweet younger sister and regretfully gives us the shield so that we can go rescue her. She tells us that legend says this shield was once used by the hero himself, and that it will serve us well. We head back to Tetra and set sail. With a last look at the island, we wave farewell to the people we have known all of our lives. Tetra makes some mocking comments as that appears to be the only way she is able to communicate, and we hop on the ship to prepare for the Forsaken Fortress. Below decks, we get some quick training from someone named Nico, who gives us a spoils bag when we beat his obstacle course in record time. We quickly arrive at the fortress, and Tetra calls us up to the deck. We see a forbidding tower of black stone, covered with searchlights and monsters. It is immediately obvious that there is no way we could approach unseen. But Tetra has a plan, and she puts us in a barrel and loads us onto the ship's catapult. With some less than comforting words about having done this many times, we find ourselves flying through the air at a suicidal pace toward the stone wall of the tower. And as we smack face first into the stone, our sword flies out of our hand and we slide down into the canal below. Thus begins a stealth mission where we are forced to avoid the many searchlights and dozens of bokoblins that patrol the fortress. We do so and even get the idea to take out the monsters controlling the lights. And as we head up there, a voice emanates from our pocket, and we find a magical stone that Tetra's snarky voice is coming from. She tells us that she slipped this rock into our pocket so that she could talk to us and see what we were doing. She tells us that we will likely need to find a door directly under the room where we believe Errol is being kept so that we can ascend the tower. While we are doing that, taking out the monsters should be a matter of using our shield to disarm the bokoblins and then kill them with their own weapons. Taking this advice, we assault the first searchlight and do exactly that. Using this tactic, we ascend the fortress and disable all the searchlights on our way. In the room with the door that we need, we find a pair of moblins guarding the door, and we use a handy barrel nearby to sneak past their dumb faces. On the third level of the fortress, we finally find our sword, but are quickly confronted by a higher-ranking bokoblin using a sword and shield. This enemy tries some fancy moves on us, but is no match for our spiffy green tunic and fancier swordwork. We make quick work of it and head into the room at the top of the tower. We see a cage at the far side of the room that contains a number of young women, all with blonde hair and long ears like Errol. To our great relief, we also see Errol. We rush towards her to free her from this prison, but a huge shadow swallows us, and the suffocating weight and musky stench of feathers surrounds us. We feel hard claws and scaly feet grip us, and we are once again airborne. But this time as a captive of the gigantic bird. It flies us to a ledge on the far side of the fortress where we can barely make out a huge man with fiery red hair and a long black cloak. This figure says nothing, but the bird obviously serves it, and with a mere gesture of his head, the man commands the bird to toss us out to sea. As we fly through the air, screaming our fear and frustration, all we can think about is the look of dashed hope that Errol had when we failed to rescue her. However will we get back there? How can we get past that gigantic bird? What are those girls doing there in the first place? And who is that shadowy figure with the fiery red hair? All of these questions disappear from our mind as we hit the water with the force of a sack of bricks. And right as we are about to lose all consciousness, we catch a brief glimpse of a reddish shape gliding towards us on the tides of the sea.
This has been the plot recap as read by Matt. Let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. All right, Matt. So the time has come. This moment has been so long in the making. I mean, I have been trying to convince you to play this game for years and years and years. It's a game that I love. I hold it very dear. I esteem it very high. Like I rate it very highly amongst the canon of Zelda games. And, with the goal of this podcast being for both of us to play each Zelda game, including the ones we've never played before, the time has now come for you to, dive into it.
Indeed.
And for us to figure out what you thought of it and where you're at with it. So with that in mind, I'm going to open up the floor to you and just let you give us your off the cuff, like how was this for you? Did you enjoy yourself? What are your impressions here? And we'll get more into nitty gritty specifics about the intro of the game after that, but just lay it on me.
Yeah, I really did enjoy this first little bit. It is a little more involved than most intro sections of Zelda games. Starting out with a stealth mission was interesting. I can't think of another Zelda game where we really do that. Most of the time, it's just, getting the hang of sword mechanics or getting the hang of, movement mechanics and item mechanics. And there's really none of that in this first section, which I found very interesting. Not in a bad way, but just in a different kind of way. I still have to be honest that I have a hard time with the chibi art style. It's just not my favorite, and I know that I'm probably going to get crucified by some people who just love it and think it's adorable and so cute and blah 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 whatever, which to each their own. It's just not my favorite style. Outside of that, the artwork, the landscape and the textures,
the cell shading
is gorgeous. I love that. What Max said about the lighting being harsher in the Wii U version, I can definitely tell. It's very bright and heavily saturated. Whereas I think I've seen some pictures of it on the GameCube where it's a little darker and more shaded. And I think that might be a little better in my opinion. But just overall, very, very well done. The music is phenomenal. I love the tone setting that the music has, the feeling of tropical peace and tranquility that's on Outset Island. Then the spookiness of the Forsaken Fortress, and I just have really, really enjoyed the vibe of the game so far.
I mean, is this not just one of the most cheerful games that you've ever played?
It's hard to be in a bad mood when this game is on in the room. From the title music to the Outset Island music to, everything about it. It just brings a brightness and a joy into the space that it occupies. And that's something that I need more of in my life. So I'm very appreciative of that at this moment.
And, honestly, the neat thing is that you haven't even heard the best two songs in the game yet. So.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but amazing things about Dragon Roost Island. I've heard Dragon Roost Island before, but not in game. So I'm very excited about that one. And I've also heard the Windfall Island, which I did play a little bit ahead as well. And man, I was vibing to Windfall Island a lot yesterday.
Yeah. The soundtrack in this game is truly one of its highest points. It's a game full of high points, honestly, but its soundtrack is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed yourself, honestly. And I knew that your first impression on the chibi art style was, because it's not like you didn't know what this looked like.
Right. I have actually played 15 minutes of Wind Waker before.
Well, and just
that was it.
And you've just through osmosis and existing on the internet, have absorbed the way this game looks.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So yeah, I knew that your first impression was probably going to hold true. What I'm curious to see is if it kind of grows on you over the course of playing the game, and sort of where you net out with it towards the end of the game. And yeah, we'll definitely kind of be, we'll be keeping an eye on that situation, checking in with you periodically. One of the things that I really wanted to mention is that, we'll get into the stealth mission, as you called it, here in just a little bit, but let's talk about the introductory area, the place that we really load into with this game, which is Outset Island. And as you said, this has got all the amazing tropical, cheery, sunlit vibes that you would want from a location like this. I think that this might be one of my favorite places that Link lives at the start of the game,
Mm-hmm. It's a place I would want to live.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For sure. No question. I live there.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely idyllic. And what I like about it is that it's populated by characters who have a lot of character. One of the things that I think this animation style really is able to do is to give a lot of personality to character models. And so, I think that we see a lot of that in this village. We've got Snot-Nosed Kid, Link's grandma has got a lot of personality. Orca's got a lot of personality. Errol has a lot of personality. Beetle, who we meet here for the first time.
Indeed, there he is, the man himself.
The introduction of the legendary Beetle. This was his first appearance in the Legend of Zelda series, and yeah, I mean, I feel like all of these characters are just like rendered and designed so well, and they've all got so much personality, not only in the way that they look, but also in like the movements. You know, there's like a lot of fun attitude to the movements and like the mannerisms of characters in this game.
Yeah, so what I would say, not necessarily in counterpoint to that, but I would say that it is very if an actor were doing this, we would call it like meta acting. Like they're overacting it, right? Like it's very exuberant and it is very expressive.
Like I'm thinking of the moment that the giant bird like turns and watches the huge rock catapulting up towards it. You know, it's like, it's fun little comic relief-esque moments like that.
Yeah, that's what I would kind of. It's almost silly, and you know, I think that it matches the tone of the game for sure. It's not my favorite thing to be this supercilious about every aspect of the game. Like even Link's expressions of like distaste when he gets the green tunic, like it made me laugh. And then it just like kept happening at so many other points of the game. And I'm just like, okay, like it was funny the first time. It's still like humorous. I'm concerned that will kind of wear off on me somewhat soon.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll see. I don't recall. I mean, you know, it's not like this stops happening throughout the game, but I think it does get a little front loaded.
Yeah.
You know,
that's fair.
Because the game does get a little bit more serious as it goes forward. You know, it never gets into like Twilight Princess territory.
Yeah. No, I don't want every game to be Ocarina of Time Emo Edition, which is Twilight Princess. So.
Right, exactly. So let's back up for 1 second, because I know we normally start off these intro episodes by talking about the lore. You know,
yes.
We typically get a big lore dump at the beginning of these games, actually starting really with our most recent game that we played, Zelda 2.
Yes, big lore dump.
Yeah, as that game really established a pattern of just dumping a whole lot of narrative onto you, you know, and giving us a lot to talk about. And this game is really no different. We have an animated, kind of Deathly Hallows sort of animated intro section.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking more of the way that they do the Face Palace in Link's Awakening Switch remaster, because it's the same like glyph
like
structure.
Yeah,
like I wouldn't go as far as Deathly Hallows because there's not animated characters acting it out, right?
That's fair.
It's definitely the side-scrolly glyphness, and I like it a lot. I think it's an effective storytelling mechanic, especially when you're trying to give the impression of legends or ancient pieces of literature. I think really thinking about like the story of Troy would be a lot like this for ancient Greece or the Romans, right? Like I imagine this is what it was like telling the story of the fall of Troy and Achilles and everything for the Romans. I mean, I know they had papyrus and stuff, but like it was mostly oral tradition. So sitting around a campfire, someone reciting the epic of the Iliad. And like, I feel like that's what this is trying to communicate. And I think it's done very effectively.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's so interesting because, you know, we had a pretty big discussion in the last few weeks about how, I think we talked about this with Max in the recap for Zelda 2. We talked about how the Zelda series does not have a lot of direct sequels, right?
Right.
And when it does have, you know, when it does have a game that establishes itself explicitly as taking place after another previous game, it's typically pretty, like, there might be some mentions of things that happened in that first game, but it's not usually too specific, right?
It's normally fairly well disguised.
Yeah. This game really sets itself apart in that way. This introductory lore dump references specifically events that took place in Ocarina of Time, and even goes so far as to label the Link of that game as the hero of time, to kind of pull that name back out and really talk specifically about that version of Link and the things that happened in that game, which is really interesting to me. I think it's awesome. As big fans of Ocarina of Time, I think it's very nice for it to be, not really playing around, not trying to obfuscate its connection to that game. It's stating very plainly, this follows the events of Ocarina of Time, which was still a fairly recent game as of the making of this game, right? And also a highly well-received one. Yep. So I'm sure that kind of played into this a little bit, like Nintendo knew at the time. Ocarina of Time was a huge hit. People loved it. So let's go ahead and mention that. Let's get that top of people's mind. And of course, the events that are being mentioned do conform to the ending of Ocarina of Time and the creation of the adult timeline.
So I also really loved the direct callback to Ocarina of Time, and this is obviously the first 3D game. I say obviously, I shouldn't say stuff like that. Not everybody has the knowledge of Zelda that we have, so I sound like an elitist when I say stuff like that. This is, if you didn't know, the first 3D game after Majora's Mask, which was a immediate sequel to Ocarina of Time. The two games in between Majora's Mask and this game were Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, both Capcom games that were in the top-down format. I think they're on the Game Boy Advanced or Game Boy Color.
Which ones?
Oracle's.
Game Boy Color.
Yeah, they're on the Game Boy Color. So this is your first foyer back into the world of 3D Zelda after the direct sequel of Majora's Mask. So the fact that they are continuing the story of the Hero of Time, I think, is a very intentional thing, that they are, banking on, cashing in on the success of Ocarina of Time, the success of Majora's Mask, the belovedness of that characterization of Link, and just pulling that forward into this game to give the player some type of direct connection to those games, but also by removing it so far in time from those games, allowing it to be its own distinct thing, its own game, its own adventure, while still paying homage. So I think that is really well done and kind of a good way of doing things, something that they continue to do throughout the rest of the 3D games. And I think this was kind of Nintendo figuring out that Zelda is, they're standalone adventures, but it's okay to have things interconnected, because this was really the time of that sequels were big, and there was a lot of interconnected stories in gaming beginning to really show itself. And I think that this was an era of pushing towards that more connected narrative style. So I think this is them leaning in, but also still trying to remain what we would call like a bottle episode, right? Or a standalone adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because the story that's being told here isn't even necessarily a hopeful one, right?
Right.
And, the events of kind of what unfolded in Hyrule after Link, the Hero of Time, being sent back by Zelda to his own time, it seems like it actually got pretty bleak there for a while, right?
Yeah.
Hyrule, as it had been, kind of sort of devastated by Ganon in his 7-year reign of terror, continued on. And then after a while, Ganon was able to escape from the seal that had been placed on him by us and the sages and Zelda. And, people are expecting a Hero of Time to come forward and save them. Only it doesn't happen because, we were sent back in time. That character does not exist in that timeline anymore.
Yeah. And there's no descendant of the hero in the adult timeline that I'm aware of. So yeah, there's not much there.
Yeah. And so, it's sort of interesting because this introductory lore dump really kind of leaves us on a bit of a cliffhanger, right? It mentions this kingdom very specifically and then doesn't really expound on that any further. It just says nobody knows what became of that kingdom. And then next thing you know, we're dropped into a setting which is notably not that kingdom.
Yeah, and anybody that played Ocarina of Time would immediately be aware of that by the fact that they are on an ocean. Like, there is no ocean in Ocarina of Time. It's completely, utterly removed, both now from a story perspective, but also from a geographic perspective. So
right,
it's just totally separate. So it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of the introductory lore that we have here. Of course, the establishing setting of the character that we're going to be playing in this game, this version of Link. I really love the different ways that these games keep finding to put rando kids in green clothes. You know,
yeah, like always.
And I really like the recurring joke of like people like you're wearing his green clothes and everyone's just like, my dude, it is a tropical climate here. That looks really warm, you know?
Yeah. And I had a note written down. I was like, why is this so warm? And then I looked at it later and like, he's got tights, he's got long boots, he's got long sleeves. Yeah. He is fully layered up with a hat in basically like Hawaii, and that doesn't sound like fun.
Whereas his Outset Island garb, it looked pretty comfy for a day at the beach, right?
He was vibing. He was throwing up a shaka and just sitting on the beach drinking the orange drink of tiki pleasure.
Got his little lobster shirt on.
I love that lobster shirt. I want one.
Shirt. So actually, fun little thing here. I didn't realize this, but I fired up this save on the Wii U that I played this game on before and beaten this game on before. And there was a little Triforce symbol next to my new save file. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it just meant that had previously been that slot had previously had a beaten game, you know?
Right.
Because it didn't have anything to do with hero mode. And just for the record, I am playing this in hero mode. That's not.
Obviously.
But hero mode was still able to be toggled on and off, and that Triforce symbol was there no matter what. So I wasn't sure at all what that meant. Loaded into the game, got through to the part where you get the clothes from your grandma, and something really weird happened. Link is holding his hand up like he just got the clothes, but there's nothing there. The air over him is just empty. And Grandma says something. She says something weird. It's something along the lines of, these are clothes that are invisible except to those who are incredibly honest, or something like that. It's a weird piece of dialogue. And then the scene ends, and Link is still wearing his Outset Island garb, lobster gear, and pants and all that, right? So turns out what that little symbol means is once you've beaten the game, if you fire up a new game in that same slot, you get to play through that entire version of the game wearing Link's Outset Island clothes.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so I shut that down, and I went and redid that 5 minutes of game in another file because I feel like it's important for me to, be wearing Link's actual outfit for this, for our purposes of doing a podcast about this whole thing. But
I mean, that's fair, but also I would totally rock the lobster shirt.
Well, Matt, one day when you come back and play this game again, after having beaten it once, that option will be open to you. It's actually kind of Breath of the Wild-y, right?
It is very Breath of the Wild-y. Very, the blue, the long sleeve, he's got orange pants, but it is easily be tan. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
Okay. So, yeah, that's my fun little story about Link's Outset Island garb.
That is a fun little story. Thank you for sharing.
Since I mentioned, let's go ahead and get into our discussion about gameplay here. And since I mentioned it, I am playing the game in hero mode. What that means, pretty standard for Zelda games, is that I take more damage from enemies, and there are no heart drops in the world. You're only able to replenish your health by use of potions and fairies. So,
well, good luck. I'm sure you will be fine.
Yeah, I don't recall this being one of the harder games to really do that with. So it's just a fun challenge, honestly.
It doesn't seem like it would be all that bad. I got hit one time in my pull section.
So here's one thing that I really wanted to talk about in terms of the gameplay.
Tell me.
Because one of the things that we've mentioned a lot is one of the reasons that I specifically don't remember Twilight Princess super fondly. Mm-hmm. Is because to me, the controls and the way that Link moves in that game feel a little stiff and a little clunky, right?
Yeah.
Especially in comparison to this game, which came out before Twilight Princess. And every time I load into this game, I'm impressed. I'm impressed all over again by just how fluid it feels, just how fluid Link's motions feel, especially once you get the sword and you start doing like sword combat and training and everything. It's just a very nice and very smooth feeling experience.
I absolutely agree. It's very fluid. Everything connects and flows from one move to the next. Everything from crouching to crawling to the combos you can do that are the especially like the stab combo, I think is really neat because you do the stab and then like a twirl jump move, and it all just flows very naturally. There's no stuttering, there's no standing still really. Even the just walking around the island feels like you're almost gliding. The combat roll is smoother than it is in really any other game that I think I've played.
And we have a parry.
We have what?
Or not a parry, we have a dodge attack.
We do, yeah. I did that, which was really cool. I liked that it was not the same as like the Skyward Sword shield bash. It was it's like almost Aikido-esque where you just like dodge, flow around, and then hit from behind. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah,
it's definitely a very different combat style, and I like it a lot. I think it's very well done, and it does feel, like you said, smooth, and everything flows well.
Yeah, which honestly just dovetails so well with everything about this game. Just feels so fluid and so relaxing in some ways to me. That carries from the aesthetic into the movement and into combat and all these other things. It's just an all-encompassing sort of package, and I really do enjoy it. I don't know. What else do we want to talk about in this? Like before we get into Dungeon Map, which is I think where we're going to talk about Forsaken Fortress, right?
I had some notes that I thought were really interesting. So the fact that all of the houses on Outset Island have upside down Triforces on the doors, I thought was really cool. It's almost like it's the whole thing of the legend being lost to time, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like they know what it is, but they're using it incorrectly almost.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
And of course, this is long before Low Rule was even a twinkle in Eiji Onuma's eye.
Yeah, so it's not indicative of Low Rule in any way, for sure. I think it's also cool that the shield that's hanging in the house actually reminds me more of A Link to the Past shield than it does the Ocarina of Time's Hylian shield. So I wrote that down as a note as well. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that looks a lot like the shield in A Link to the Past, or something like that. So
I really like this shield as well. And it is a little weird because when you pick up the shield, the little text bubble says that it was fabled to have been used by the hero himself.
And like that's definitely not the Hylian shield.
Right, exactly.
So it's definitely not. And the bird on it, actually, I was looking at it more closely in some artwork earlier today. It looks like the artwork for the Thunderbird in Adventure of Link.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it does. It looks like either that or like even a Sphinx maybe, but it is not Loftwing for sure.
I always thought it was like a little sea demon sort of.
Yeah, it's
thing.
kind of that. But like if you go look at it and also pull up Terada's artwork of the Thunderbird, and I think you would agree that there's a little bit of similarity, at least in the face.
Yeah. Honestly, it looks sort of like Betro.
Oh, it does kind of look like Betro also. That's funny. I didn't make that connection. Shame on me.
Yeah, no, I love the way this shield looks. And little spoiler here. There are only 2 shields in this game, and this is one of them. So,
well, fair enough.
Yeah. Definitely really like this shield design as well. How do you feel about the sword? Because this is very much...
it looks like a gladius.
It is a gladius. It's very different from the Kokiri sword. It has no handguards really. It's just got a little
the cup basically.
Yeah. It's definitely a little training sword looking deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to drink some whiskey.
I never apologize for that.
Ooh, that one went down a little rough.
What are you drinking?
Just Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is hard to come by down here in Texas. But
it went down your throat sideways.
It did a little bit. Not quite fully sideways, maybe a little diagonally.
Okay.
Some of these characters are really funny on Outside Island. The guy that tells you can find treasure by cutting up grass. I think he's just trying to get you to cut his lawn for free, which totally worked on me, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's implied.
Yeah. Already talked about the facial expressions. So
what do we think of
this? Hold on. Is this the first game where we have 3 item slots? R, L, and Y?
No, you had 3 item slots in the N64 games. They were bound to the yellow N6 up.
You're right.
Yeah.
Dang, it's been so long since I played the actual N64 game. I thought that was I had forgotten that was how it was. I thought that might have been a 3DS improvement, but that makes much more sense.
Cool.
You were going to ask me something.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you think? So we've talked about a few different characters, but how do you feel about Tetra? We haven't really talked about Tetra yet.
Not a fan so far.
Really?
No. Like, I like snarky characters. I think Tattle's funny, but Tattle's not funny until you get more of the way into the game. Like, the way that she starts off is just not great. There's not a thank you. She literally just says like, oh, ignore him after you just saved her freaking life. And then your sister gets kidnapped by a gigantic bird and she says, shrug it off, forget about it. Like, screw you. That's my sister.
I mean, a very precocious character. There's no getting around that.
I have no doubt if she is a continuing character that she will grow on me, because like that's generally how these characters work, because they start out abrasive, but then they grow on you over time and you learn to love them by the end of the game if they're done well, which Zelda normally does characters well. So I have no I fully expect that I will grow to love Tetra, but right out of the gate in this first chunk, nothing to like really at all as a character. And I mean, just think about it. Like, you've already played the full game, so you have the full history and context of her full character arc.
Sure.
Right out of the gate, is there any redeeming quality that she has?
I mean, I really do like kind of the attitude of the character. I think that you're supposed to kind of feel like maybe she's a little unnecessarily prickly, you know? I think that's kind of intentional characterization. I do sort of appreciate I don't know. I feel like it fits within her character as like the boss of a pirate crew, right?
Sure, but bosses of pirate crews are not likable people when they're talking about forgetting about the fact that your sister just got kidnapped by a bird.
I mean, sure. Give it some time. Give it some time and some room.
I'm saying that I'm going to do that, but we're talking about specifically within this chunk of game.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. So we'll get more into Tetra.
We'll check in on Tetra later.
What about the pirate crew? Because we've got a lot of, that's certainly a motley assemblage of people.
I have a note here. Literally says pirates dope. Pirates are cool. Well, there's nothing wrong with pirates. Pirates are fun.
Sure. One of the things that I think is so fun about this game is that it's a little jarring to see, to see like genres that are not straight medieval.
Yeah. Agreed.
Popping up here, right?
Yeah.
Sort of in the same way that tech fantasy stuff in Breath of the Wild
was it wasn't just knights and ninjas, and it was a little bit different.
Yeah. And I think the closest that this series ever really came to this prior to this game was Majora's Mask at times felt maybe just a little bit more 17th or 18th century.
It was a little more colonial.
Yeah. Like, they had like clock towers and, mayors of towns and all that. But even that was still a bit more, it was still pretty much underneath the umbrella of the fantasy genre,
Sure.
But this is very much like, Pirates of the Caribbean meets like Nickelodeon.
Yeah,
agreed. Is kind of what we're doing here. And I think it's really nice. I think, I love when Zelda is not afraid to take big swings in its tone from game to game. And I feel like some of its greatest successes have been the result of, of the people making these games being willing to do that. Because, as awesome as Ocarina of Time is, I don't want to play 12 games that are all just like riffs on Ocarina of Time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So I think that the pirate crew is pretty neat. There's obviously like the doofus. There's the guy who's out there for adventure. There's Nico, who's like the ratty little underling who's trying to be the big man now that you're the new kid, right? Like I can easily see a path forward where I grow to really like all of these characters. So
yeah,
I'm excited about that for sure. One thing I want to say, there's two things I want to say before we move on to what's
Dungeon Map.
Dungeon Map. Thank you. Is when you are doing the sword training with Orca, and he's teaching you the stab attack. He says, "Good, Link, keep thrusting."
Well,
and I just want to say,
well, that is what more is there to add, really? I mean,
this is not something that should ever come out of anybody's mouth.
Well, ever. I don't want to say ever, but I mean, like,
yes. Well, in the context of this
is your friendly neighborhood podcast run by a couple of 14-year-olds. Yeah. Look, I gotta believe that the innuendo was slightly lost on the translation team.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
But maybe not. Who's to say?
I mean, I think it's pretty universal, but I don't know.
You got any other gems hidden in your notes over there?
We have a section for music, right?
We do have a section for music.
Okay, then I'll save that
one. We have a section for music as it relates to the dungeon. If it's not specific to the dungeon, then it belongs here.
Cool. So then I have two more things. So it's the pirate ship. The theme on the pirate ship.
Yeah.
Is it just me or is that very Groose?
It is very
Groose. It's very. Thank you. Okay. As soon as I heard it, I was like, was this Groose's theme? Just like out of the gate. Obviously, Groose's theme would be the pirate ship theme because Skyward Sword came after, but very, very similar.
Well, let's be real. If Groose existed in this timeline,
he would totally be a pirate.
He would be on this pirate ship.
He would be on that pirate ship for sure. And he'd be inappropriately trying to flirt with Tetra, getting his ass thrown off the plank every day.
Yep.
Like, just would happen.
Sounds about right to me.
And then last thing is, so what is up with Hylians? I guess they're not Hylians per se. Not all having long ears anymore. Like, that was very weird to me. Is like only some of them have long ears? Was it just like a genetic trait that like kind of bred out of
I'm not
species?
sure.
I think it's weird.
It seems like we're sort of meant to assume that those who do have long ears are of more pure Hylian heritage.
Yeah,
right?
I guess so.
I think that's the implication. I guess I would assume that we're going to hear just a little bit more about this as we get further into the game, and it gets stated plainly why this bird is searching out people who have long ears.
I assume you're telling me that is something that will happen later in the game.
It is. I just don't know how specifically it's mentioned that like, oh, all Hylians used to have long ears, but over time this and this happened. Like, I don't know how specifically it's stated. But I do think you're probably correct. I think the assumption is that over a very long period of time, it was a trait that was sort of bred out. And those who still have it can be assumed to have a large amount of pure Hylian blood.
There you go. Yeah. Cool. That's kind of what I thought, but it was just an interesting thing that I was like, that's weird that, anyway, there you go. Those were the last of my, I have many more notes here, but I'll save some of them for other parts. But yeah, those are my notes.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and move on to part 3, which is the dungeon map, in which we talk about this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. Of course, this week we don't necessarily have a traditional dungeon. We have a small combat section that we get up to in Outset Island. And then once we get to the Forsaken Fortress, we do have a little bit of a more contained dungeon-like area, but really, I mean, you mentioned it up front, Matt. It functions mostly as a stealth section.
Yeah, it's really not quite like Assassin's Creed-esque, but yeah, it was fun. There are very few whole encounters that are stealth encounters in Zelda games. Like the one that comes immediately to mind is sneaking into Hyrule Palace in Ocarina of Time, and also probably the more extended version of that, but less lengthy version of this is the Deku Palace in Majora's Mask. So I think this kind of toes that line and does it very well. I think it was very successful.
Yeah, well, and it's just so fun because those two areas specifically always felt to me like they felt more gamey than actual functional spaces in a world, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Like they all sort of felt arranged in order to be a part of this little stealth mini game that they, you know.
Yeah.
But the Forsaken Fortress really feels like it feels like a fortress. It feels like a fortress that is under heavy guard.
Well, it does, except for the fact that there's only 4 or 5 actual enemies. So you got the 3 that are operating the searchlights.
Well, you have the sentries who patrol the hallways.
The 2. What sentries that patrolled what hallways? I didn't see any sentries that patrolled hallways.
The ones that if they see you, they throw you in jail.
Yeah, the 2 that are guarding the door. The 2 moblins.
There are more than that.
I saw 2 moblins.
There's definitely some in the lower hallways.
I never went in the lower hallways.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was never in the lower hallways.
Okay, so there's definitely 2 in the lower hallways, and then there are these little devil guys. I don't know what they're called. I'll need to go.
I got shot by a gargoyle thing when I fell into one of the bunk beds.
It's not that. Hold on. Wind Waker.
But anyway, from what I saw, and apparently I didn't do this totally correctly, but from what I saw, there was the 3 bokoblins that ran the searchlights. There was the 2 moblins that guarded the door. There was the 1 moblin on the 3rd level, and then the 1 green bokoblin that guarded the door to the cages. So
here we go. They're called mini blins.
Oh,
it's these little pygmy moblin looking dudes.
Oh, and those are creepy.
They are creepy.
Ew.
And specifically in like the kitchen area in the lower floor of the Forsaken Fortress, these guys will mob you out of nowhere. And I seem to recall like later in the game, you fight more of them and they're very weak. They go down very easily against your sword attacks. But of course, in this section of the game, we don't have our sword.
Right.
We get launched into the Forsaken Fortress via barrel on catapult, which I thought was a hilarious moment. By the way.
It is funny. I enjoyed that quite a lot.
And once we land in the fortress, we've lost our sword. It falls onto an upper level. We got to sneak around to go get it back. So for the entirety of this section of the game, right up until the very end, we do not have a sword. We've got to rely purely on stealth. And in a fun little twist, whatever weapons that we can disarm from our enemies.
I loved that. I loved that you could pick up even when you have your own sword, you can pick up other people's swords or weapons. Like, I thought that was so cool. I loved that.
Again, like, it's so wild to me. Like, it's one of those things that if you told me, like, if I didn't know the order they came out and you told me that Twilight Princess came out before Wind Waker, I would believe you, just because these sorts of things are fun extra additions in this game that you don't see again going forward.
Right.
Like, you don't really see this happening again until Breath of the Wild.
No, Skyward Sword. You pick up Galactus' sword, smack him in the face with it.
Sure, in one fight. But like, you know, this is a thing that recurs throughout this game. It's like a mechanic.
Okay, fine.
And yeah, so in that way, I actually found it to be a really cool precursor to Breath of the Wild, right?
Yeah, like in that very specific microcosm, sure. I will just say that I thought it was great. I thought it was a fun addition. It was a fun little thing that I didn't know you could do. And when Tetra was like, yeah, disarm them and take their weapon, and I was like, cool, okay. So yeah, that was really fun. Very enjoyed.
We also managed to do our best Solid Snake impression in this area. And by that, I mean that we
crawled in a barrel.
Yeah, we're able to take advantage of nearby empty containers to hide ourselves from spotlights.
For monsters that have pig-like snouts, they are apparently incapable of smelling a human 10 feet away from them or less than in a barrel, which I thought was hilarious.
Those barrels, they've got to be pure cedar or something, right?
They're disguising the scent.
They're highly fragrant wood. Yeah,
fair enough.
That's what we're gonna say anyway.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
We'll go
Ocean
with
cedar.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Why not? So anyway, yeah, I think that all the sneaking around is pretty fun. To me, this section of the game, like, early on in games, occasionally start to get frustrated if we go too long without me getting to the main gameplay loop.
Right.
And honestly, God, this is really meant to be more of an episode celebrating Wind Waker than it is knocking Twilight Princess. But Twilight Princess is huge about this, though, right? Because you start the game and then you get dumped into a wolf section, and then 3 hours later you get your sword and are able to do Link sword fighting things, right?
It's fair.
I think that this whole thing, it probably takes about 30, maybe 45 minutes to get to that point, right? And to me, that's about the sweet spot. Like, if it had gone on any longer than this, I think I would have started to get real frustrated.
Yeah.
But I think that what this is able to do is to, one, heighten the tension, because this is a very tense feeling environment, right?
Yes, totally agree.
And it's so cool because that's a very harsh juxtaposition with the tone
of the game in general,
and of Outset Island, which we were just at, right? So that's a lot of fun. But
also 10 points for juxtaposition.
Thank you. But yes, I think it's a really well done section of the game that functionally serves to introduce you to a lot of the movement options that you have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being able to stealth in barrels, being able to sidle along walls, all of that sort of stuff. It's a good education in those things. So, I think that for a first fun little area that isn't quite a dungeon, it's a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Yeah.
I really don't have anything bad to say about it at all, and I normally have at least one thing to say, one negative thing to say about.
I wish that
actually I do have one thing to say. I wish there was more combat. Just like I enjoyed the little bit that there was, so I wanted more. Like, not in a negative way. It's not boring. I just I want more of it because I enjoyed the little bit that I got to experience. So give me more.
I wish that
more. Give me more.
Don't worry, Matt. You'll have more. You'll get more.
I mean, I know I will, but
I wish that I hesitate to call it a boss fight, but that moment when the spikes come up from the floor and you get your sword and you've got to fight that bokoblin.
Yeah.
In order to get into the bird's roost or whatever. I really wish that had been just a slightly more difficult fight, right?
Yeah, I killed him in 30 seconds less than. It was crazy.
Exactly. I really wish that had been a fight that just took a second to get through, you know? But, que sera, what could have been, all that. We'll have many more fun combat experiences later in this game. Of course, we get into the bird's roost, and we are not to have victory this day. We don't rescue Errol. The bird picks us up, and we catch a glimpse of a very interesting looking person at the end of this dungeon.
Indeed we do. A tall, cloaked figure with fiery red hair.
Wonder who that might be.
I wonder indeed. In my notes it says, well, hello, Ganondorf.
Exactly. And it's so fun because just right off the bat, the very first time I ever played this game, obviously you get nothing. You don't even get dialogue from Ganondorf here.
Right.
You get a little twist of the head,
Yep.
Just
not even a...
And you don't even see his eyes.
You don't even get the characteristic Ganondorf smirk.
Yeah.
I was really expecting the Ganondorf smirk.
Mm-hmm. But I will say, the first time that I ever played this game, I was so excited by this moment because I love games in which we get to see Ganon's human incarnation.
I totally agree. I think, there's something to be said about Ganon in beast form just because, it's the original way that he was represented. And in really the first 3 games, at least 4, really, if you count his Shadow or his Nightmare version. I think that it's really fun to see Ganondorf back, and also the direct callback to Ocarina of Time and them connecting that the evil that awoke to drown the kingdom in darkness again was the same evil. So they're really drawing this connective tissue and laying it on really thick back to that specific Ganondorf, which I love. And that was actually one of the things I also really loved about Twilight Princess was how they brought back that Ganondorf, and the connective tissue that Nintendo is able to weave between these games while still keeping them siloed and feeling distinctive and feeling like their own adventures is really, really cool and unique, and I really love it.
Yeah, it is just so interesting because I wonder what happened that was able to or that made Ganon able to break the seal on the Sacred Realm.
Yeah.
He had the Triforce of Power with him when Zelda and the sages sealed him away. So I guess it's just a matter of over time it grew in strength.
Yeah, he grew in strength. The seal weakened. Obviously, there's no hero wielding the Master Sword to shore it up. The sages maybe, waned in power, and there's no mention of any kind of royal family at this point in time. So I know, unfortunately, that there is a Zelda out there. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who doesn't know, but I'm aware of that. So it just seems like one of those things, the same thing that happened in Twilight Princess, where just eventually Ganondorf was able to break free because he just grew in power.
Somehow Ganondorf returned.
I was gonna say it. This is better though. I don't know why, but it is. It's better.
It is. It's
the same, but better.
That was pretty bad.
It was so bad.
It was really
bad. Mostly because there were so many other directions they could have gone and just didn't.
I know. So that brings us to the end of the Forsaken Fortress.
Welcome back to Sacred Realms, a Star Wars Retrospective Podcast, where we on the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I was gonna say where we drag Episode 9 through the mud at any given opportunity, which is startlingly easy to do.
Startlingly easy.
Yeah. So, okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the Forsaken Fortress before we kind of move on from here?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good to me. Well, with that being said, let's move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. Did you have a Bloopy Trail, Matt?
I got that lady a pet pig. I gave her a pet pig.
Oh, I did that too.
Yeah, it was really fun. That was fun.
It's nice to do nice things for people.
Yeah, I like being nice. That was good. That was really it. I read all the dude's notes in the older brother's notes, and also laughed my butt off every time I knocked all of his pots off the shelves, because I did it every time I went into that house, and it was really funny.
Where does he keep getting all those pots?
He has a lot of pots.
Like,
a lot.
Like, who's bringing this dude more pots after we break them?
And someone should stop. Yeah. It's really it, I think. I can't.
Yeah, my big ones were just like in a lot of these intro areas of the 3D Zelda games, the Bloopy Trail at the very beginning becomes, can I find all the rupees that are hidden around?
Yeah, I found a lot of them, but in looking at Zelda Dungeon, I did miss some of the ones in the mountain.
Yeah, I think I came away with like 45 or so, and I spent a lot of those on stuff at Beetle, right? Like I went ahead and grabbed the bait bag.
Yep,
and
did that.
And bait.
Yep,
and Hioi pear.
I grabbed both kinds of bait that he had and the bait bag also. Yes,
I do really love that this game has
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah, I do really love that this game has got kind of a little bit more inventory to manage than a lot of Zelda games do, right? In that way, it is kind of similar again to Breath of the Wild, where we've got like, an inventory full of normal-ish seeming things that do different things in this game world,
Right.
It's a lot more things to juggle than we had in Majora's Mask, and it's more things that we have to juggle after this in Twilight Princess. Skyward Sword kind of brings it back around, right, where we have a lot of materials that we collect and that are all able to be used towards upgrading and advancing things, which is not necessarily what these are for, but it's cool to have an extra system here.
And it's a lot easier on the Wii U gamepad when I have a whole basically larger version of a Switch that is purely, in my case, dedicated to inventory management and map. So that's really cool.
So I don't mean to derail Bloopy Trails too much, but I did mean to ask you earlier, have you had much experience with a Wii U before?
No.
Okay.
This is the second thing I've ever played on a Wii U.
What was your experience playing this game with the gamepad?
I don't love the gamepad. It's kind of clunky. The joysticks are too spaced apart from the buttons, and like I don't have large hands anyway, so I can't imagine being, like a female with small hands trying to play on a gamepad. That sounds like not fun. The gamepad itself is just kind of clunky, but I like the aspect of basically having a whole other screen dedicated to inventory management, so you don't have to be going in and out of your menu all the time. Also, being able to pull your map up on it is really fun. I almost wish that I could have like, I don't know, the screen and then the controls closer together maybe. Like I could do with a smaller screen, basically is what I'm saying, is shrink that screen, put everything group it up a little closer together, and I think you have a much better functioning controller. Obviously, that then limits your ability to play game on it. But
sure. It's really interesting. To me, the biggest deal is I agree with you. To me, the joysticks are too far apart, and that makes it a little awkward. Of course, after like a few minutes, I get used to it.
It also has intrinsic motion controls, which I hate.
I'm sure you can turn that off in the settings.
I'm sure I can. I just haven't done it yet.
So yeah, I agree with you. The joysticks being kind of far apart and not being offset are.
That is true.
Yeah.
It's not offset. Every other Nintendo has offset. And I think PlayStation doesn't, but Xbox does. Yeah, every controller that I've really used throughout my entire life has had offset joysticks.
Yep,
that's crazy.
So
that is also why it feels weird.
Yeah,
to me.
so I don't love that necessarily. I do love, as you said, the inventory management as well. I will say that I have actually played this game. So this is going to be my 4th time playing Wind Waker, and I think the 3rd time that I played through it, I did so completely on the gamepad.
Nice.
I was playing it like a Switch. Really.
Interesting.
And I'm not going to do that this time. I will say that the resolution of the screen on the gamepad is better than I remembered it being. For some reason in my head, it was the same resolution as like a 3DS. And it's definitely higher than that. Like it definitely, it's got pretty good clear picture. I do want to play it on the big screen. So that's the way that I'm going to do it. But I am a little annoyed. It's irritating to me that you can switch the gameplay to your gamepad, and at that point, audio is coming through your headphone jack, right? The full game audio. I wish that I could just plug my headphones into that headphone jack and it give me the full game audio, regardless of whether or not I'm playing the full game on the gamepad. You know?
Yeah.
Like I wish that I could turn the volume completely down on my big TV, and just like, you know, not waking babies up and stuff, like just listen through the headphones. It's a really weird thing to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, all of these are probably contributing factors for why most people look back on the Wii U as maybe not like the pinnacle of Nintendo console design.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
But it's interesting because it very much, in a lot of ways, feels like a proto Switch, you know?
It does. You can see the bones there, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, regardless, let's get back to Bloopy Trails, which is what we were actually talking about. So I already said I did a big collection game with rupees on the island, and that was pretty much really it for me. You know, I tried to collect as many chests as I could. I guess the chests on Forsaken Fortress are just the compass and the map, right? So
yeah,
nothing even really to speak of there.
No item.
Yeah, so yeah, really, it's just kind of filling out my inventory in all of the ways that I could at the moment. They're not necessary at this point in the game. You don't need the bait bag right now.
Right.
But I wanted to get off of Offset Island, having purchased everything that I was able to buy from Beetle at that time.
Yep.
So that was my big Bloopy trail. Let's get into Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happen across. Matt, I am once again going to let you go first. Who was your Z targeting pick? And I feel like we've actually this is a pretty good crop of characters to choose from here.
Yeah, there's some really good ones, but mine is definitely Errol. To quote Rosa Diaz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, "If anything were to happen to Errol, I would first kill everyone in this room and then myself." And then something did happen to Errol, and now I'm going to go kill everybody in that room, and probably not myself, but, you know, yeah.
I have a hunch that Errol is probably not going to die a horrible death in this game.
Really, she better not, or I'm going to never play this game ever again.
That would be a real swerve for this like cheery, lighthearted game if it ended with Errol being slaughtered or something.
That would be so dark. Oh my gosh, that's going to make me. No, we're not doing that.
That's like even more than Twilight Princess levels of dark right there.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a good feeling about Errol, but that's a very good pick. I will say that Errol also has an alternate outfit if you start the game up in the mode that I originally did. Instead of her blue dress with a hibiscus flower on it, she's got a purple dress with a little pirate skull on it.
Aww.
So there you go. Everyone gets new outfits in the alt.
Good.
In the alt game mode. My Z targeting. I'm gonna pick Orca. I really like Orca as a character. I love this little sword mini game that you're able to do with him. It's just training right now, but when we visit him later on in the game, there's actually like a little sword training quest that you get to do, and it's a lot of fun. I really like his dynamic that he's got with his smarter yet much less likable brother who lives above him, right?
Yeah.
And I always appreciate Link being instructed in the art of combat by people who actually know how to do combat.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing for sure.
Yeah, I feel like not a lot of incarnations of Link have any sort of formal training whatsoever. It's always more like, you found this sword in a box.
Now go use it. And you're like,
go do combat.
You're like, wait, hold on, what?
Exactly. So I really enjoyed that. But Orca's got this really fun, like salty beach man who lives in a hut vibe, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think he's got a lot of character. I like that orca.
Yeah, I agree. Good character, except outside of the thrusting comment. Yes, great.
We're gonna chalk that up to some unfortunate translation and assume that orca is in fact not a huge pervo.
Okay, I think that's probably a safe assumption.
Cool. All right. Well, with that being said, let's move into part 6, which is our final thoughts, where we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he could possibly think to do.
Oh yeah, I forgot. That's my job. All right. So this intro section of the game is really a standout section for intros that we've had so far. It sets a great tone, one of joy and kind of adventure, one that is very different from the games that we've most recently played, especially. There's a lot to look forward to here from a mechanics perspective, from a music perspective, from the enjoyableness of the first little dungeon. All of it is kind of coming together to be a really great teaser for what is to come, and I'm very excited to see where it takes us. There's some great characters to be invested in. We have the return of a great villain, and trying to unravel how that all came about is definitely going to be a great mystery for us to dive into as kind of a subplot to the main plot of the game. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, and it's just a great, very strong start to the game.
Yep, couldn't agree more. With that being said, I think that's going to bring us to the end of the Sacred Realms Rundown for this week. We will, of course, be back next week with another installment of the Sacred Realms Rundown, where we cover another section of this game, including this game's first actual dungeon. Going to be a great time. We'll have a guest on for that one, Cody, as we mentioned before, and always love bringing him around to talk about these games. So before we get out of here for today, Matt, I wanted to introduce kind of a secondary section from the Sacred Realms Rundown.
Oh, no. Uh-oh.
Yeah. I wanted to, because this is sort of uncharted territory for us, right?
We don't do new things.
Previous to this, either we had both either played the game or we had both not played the game.
Ooh, yeah, true.
I guess except for A Link to the Past, which you had not played.
That's true.
Yeah. But this is a 3D game.
True.
And this game is much more in the vein of what we grew up with, that being Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask,
sure.
Right? Like this is an extension of that convention of Zelda game design.
Yep.
For one, did it feel that way to you?
Yeah, definitely. It felt familiar in a good way. Unlike Link to the Past, which felt very, foreign to me personally, this feels familiar. I had no problem at all diving in and understanding the mechanics and the gameplay and it felt not quite like slipping on an old pair of slippers, but something adjacent.
Gotcha.
Find another metaphor.
So with that being said, what would be another metaphor? It felt like I don't know. Your favorite pair of shoes.
No, because it's the same metaphor.
Slipper, yeah.
No, it's the same metaphor. It's a good home cooked meal like Mom used to make.
Feels like coming back home after a long time.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. We'll come up with something better eventually.
Sounds good. So with all that being said, here's what I wanted to talk to you about.
Yes.
What are you hoping to get out of this game going forward?
Ooh.
Like to you, so now that you've gotten your first little taste of what this game is,
yeah, what
would be required to put this game very high up in your ranking, potentially even above? I mean, I don't want to be hopeful and say Breath of the Wild, but what would knock this game above Skyward Sword in the ranking for you?
Well, it would have to really outshine Skyward Sword in the areas that Skyward Sword is strongest, right? Like it would have to give me really excellent characterizations of our main characters and our supporting cast, really good dungeons. One area that I can already tell you it probably will exceed Skyward Sword is exploration. So I can tell that it's probably going to overshine it there. But I'm really looking for strong characters, strong story, good mechanics. Like I like the mechanics that I've seen so far. I think that there's still room for some of the clunkiness of the Wii U specifically to hinder just in like something like using, I don't know, maybe a bow or in anything that you're using to travel around. Just that clunkiness could come into play. But I think that's what I'm really looking for is how strong is the story? How good are the characters? How fluid and intuitive and well done are the mechanics of the game and systems within.
And of course, a good crop of items.
Yes, items are good. Items, and I think that for me, that flows into the mechanics part of it, right? Because items are part of how you flesh out mechanics within the game itself. And I think that is a strong point of Skyward Sword as well as Ocarina of Time, is they have really excellent items that play well with the systems that they're designed to play with, and they flesh out that game in a meaningful way.
Cool. The last thing that I want to ask you about is, so each of these 3D Zelda games has its main exploratory area.
Sure.
And we haven't really had a lot of time to get to know the Great Sea yet. But if you had to guess, make some assumptions about what you're expecting to get out of that.
Mm-hmm. I would like to see some treasure. I want to see some pirate booty. Not the sexual kind, but the gold kind. And I would like to see maybe some naval combat would be kind of fun, like boarding a bokoblin ship, or once I get a bow or some kind of ranged weapon, just like being able to shoot stuff from the King of Red Lions, which I know is your little boat that you get. And I don't know, kind of finding cool little lost islands that have things to find on them, like little Easter eggs and little puzzles and stuff. Like that would be fun.
Okay, very nice. Well,
maybe a sea monster or two.
Maybe a sea monster or two. Well, time will only tell if Matt's expectations and hopes are borne out into real life things that actually happen. Some of those I don't think you'll have to wait very long to experience, and some of them we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But is it fair to say that you are excited?
I am very excited. I have been excited since we concocted this crazy idea of Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast.
Well, there you go. You'll love to hear it.
And I'm pretty sure I just butchered the word retrospective, but whatever.
No, I think everyone knew what you meant, Matt. We understood. We understood the spirit of the statement. Well, all right. With all that being said, I think that brings us to the end of the episode for the week. As predicted, we are well under the 2-hour mark for this one.
Yay, go us.
That is an 1.5 hour long episode right there.
Woot woot.
Which I feel like back in the day we felt like was like
really long.
So long.
And we were like, oh, we've got to shorten this up. And then 2 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Might have never happened again. Who's to say? But for now, I think it's fun just to be able to have a conversation where, yeah, you know what? We're digging into a new experience, and we're pretty much completely in agreement about what we got into here.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
That's a good time. All right. Well, with all that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up, get out of here for the week. If you enjoyed today's show and you would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show, and that makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on The Wind Waker Chapter 2. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. The Wind Waker can be played on the Nintendo GameCube in its original version. It can be played on the Nintendo Wii U in its HD version, and I believe either version can be played on a Dolphin emulator, given that you have a compatible device, which I think should be any PC capable of running games of any kind. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. We will catch y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Sacred Realms is an independent podcast production, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Our music comes from Zelda and Chill by Mikkel and is graciously provided to us by Mikkel and Game Chops Records. Zelda and Chill is available to stream on Spotify or to purchase directly from GameChops.com. Finally, our thanks go to Nintendo for creating such exceptional and innovative experiences.